Hi, it's a Wealthy Expat here. Australia is becoming one of the worst countries to be if you're a wealthy entrepreneur or investor. You're going to pay more taxes. It's going to be harder to become tax non-resident. In this video, I interview Mark from Worldwide Accountancy, an accounting firm based in Australia. He helps Australians leave Australia, get the heck out of there, and he helps a lot of my clients pay less taxes, become tax non-resident in Australia. He's going to explain a lot about the current process of becoming Australia tax non-resident and how the rules will change, how the taxes will go up, how it's going to become extremely hard to leave. They're going the direction of the United States, taxing their citizens for years after they leave. You really need to watch this until the end so you understand the whole process, what to do, and what you need to start planning right now. Awesome. I am here with Mark. He's an accountant in Australia. He helps a lot of my clients lower their Australian taxes and basically get out of the Australian tax system, become Australian tax non-resident, and essentially lower their taxes legally. So Mark, if you could tell a little bit about the process of becoming Australian tax non-resident right now, then we'll talk about the future changes, which are pretty crass. They're absolutely horrible, and you should know about them when they're coming into effect pretty soon. So let's talk about how to become Australian tax non-resident, how to pay less taxes in Australia now, and then we'll talk about how it's going to change in the future, how it's going to become harder.
Yeah, thanks, Raf. Thanks for having me as well. Yeah, I've been following your stuff for a while, and yeah, I love your work. And
for sure.
So yeah, basically at the moment, when it comes to tax residency rules, there's two kind of primary tests is what I say. And they mainly, the first one is the resides test, and it's just basically where you reside. And if you don't reside in Australia, then you're no longer a tax resident of Australia. And there's kind of multiple areas under that you need to satisfy, and I guess location of assets, family, social arrangements, a few things like that. And then the second primary test is the domicile test. And the domicile is where you're basically located. And basically the way the recent tax rulings have gone by are that you need to ensure that your domicile is outside of Australia. So you've literally uprooted and ceased your ties to Australia and kind of chose a new domicile that's outside of Australia, whether that's in Dubai, Costa Rica, or the UK. And that's the main two ways in which you can currently become a non-tax resident. And they mainly revolve around just departing Australia and ceasing ties with Australia.
Got it. So ceasing ties, basically giving up your property, giving up or basically bringing on close family with you, ceasing bank accounts, all of that, and then basically putting them somewhere else. The domicile test, is it required to have a property somewhere else? If I'm leaving Australia, do I need to have a house somewhere else?
Not necessarily a house, but at least a long-term lease and a long-term visa to establish that your intention is to remain outside of Australia for at least 2 to 3 years. And that's the issue with the current rules, is it's really open to interpretation where you are based on your intentions. And that's why the Board of Taxation and the government at the moment are looking at changing that.
Got it. So it's, let's say, easy in their eyes. So they're trying to make it harder now, because basically all you need to do is cut everything off in Australia, leave, find a long-term visa. It's important that you said that. So not just long-term residence or lease, but a long-term visa. And then you can basically say that you're Australian tax non-resident. I know that you need to actually file to become Australian tax non-resident. How does that work? And can you explain a bit of that process?
Yeah. So the way you would do it is you just file it within your tax return, but it's really important to ensure you keep contemporaneous documents. So we've got it on hand to prove that you've had discussions around your residency and you are aware of your residency. That way there's no kind of any implications of tax avoidance whatsoever. So the declaration is legally done through your Australian tax return.
Got it. And you would do that for a client, right? If they want to become.
Yeah, I've done it.
Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I've done it for.
Awesome. And which is the date when they become non-resident? So basically, when do they stop paying taxes to Australia? Is it the day they actually leave? Is it the day they file their tax return?
Yeah, it's the day they leave. It's the day they cease residency, and most of the time it's the day they leave. But other times it may depend, and again, it comes down to the situation, right? So Just a quick example, if you say you move to the US and you're unsure if you're going to spend more than 3 to 5 years abroad, and after a year you end up applying for a visa or you get a green card because you're connected with someone, then that would be, as at that day, your intention has changed to no longer reside or domicile in Australia, which will mean that your residency will change. But most of the time it is when you depart Australia.
Ah, wow. Okay. So if you depart and you just nomad around the world, then you haven't really left. So let's say you go to Dubai for a month and then you go to Portugal for a month and then you start traveling all over. Australia can say, hey, you actually never left. Is that possible?
Yeah, no, pretty much, because you haven't established a domicile elsewhere.
Right. So you need to establish a visa and a lease or a residence somewhere else. That's definitely important. Cut off anything in Australia. Can I still have something in Australia? Let's say I have 3 properties. I don't want to sell them because, I don't know, I really love them. The color inside is great. Can I rent them out to people? Is that possible to become non-resident while having assets?
Yeah, that's possible. You can continue to maintain assets in Australia. And there's 2 main distinctions when it comes to tax assets in Australia. One of them is taxable Australian property, and the other is non-taxable Australian property. And they're treated slightly different. And we won't get into the nuances on it, but you can retain them both.
Okay, so you can retain them both, but you basically cannot live there. So you would be leaving Australia, getting a residence permit somewhere else, like in Dubai, getting a visa, long-term, residence long-term, and then you would leave. Perfect. So how is that going to change soon? Because this is basically the most important thing. It's relatively easy now. It's not really easy because you need a bunch of papers and a bunch of documents. And you need to have those extra ties. How is it going to change? How is it going to become harder soon?
Yeah, no, you're right, Raf. And it's going to be a bit more difficult because you can't just cease your residency as at the date of departure when your intention is to no longer live in Australia. So now what the rules are saying is there's kind of a couple ways in which you can cease your residency. And so the general gist of it is if you are a long-term resident, which means that you've been a tax resident in Australia for 3 or more years or 3 or more consecutive years, then one of the ways to cease your residency is to spend less than 45 days in Australia in the current income year and less than 45 days in Australia in the each previous 2 income tax years. So effectively, you need to spend less than 45 days in Australia over the last 3 income tax years or within each 3 income tax years. And then as at that 3rd year, you would then be considered a non-resident for tax in Australia.
Yeah, so you're basically screwed for like 3 years. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's insane that they can do such a thing, and that's if you spend less than 45 days. So if you there's a petition that has happened at the moment, and they've raised a few different kind of areas. One of them being that 45 day, they want it extended to 90, but let's say hypothetically it's still 45 days. Let's say you spent the last 2 years less than 45 days, but say someone in your family passed away and you want to spend more time in Australia on that 3rd year, you end up spending 50 days in Australia. That means you need to spend another 3 years of being less than 45 days in Australia to be a non-resident, which is, it's insane. And the thing, Rafael, is at the moment, there's been a lot of flack on these proposed rules, but it's mainly for the inbound residents. The ceasing of residency hasn't been spoken about at all, because the majority of the people are expats who live abroad or Aussies who live outside of Australia who want to come in. And the commencing of residency is also going to be a lot more easier for you to start becoming an Australian tax resident. So it hasn't had as much scrutiny than the commencing of residency. So I can't imagine that the 3-year adhesive test rules will ever change. So that is frightening in my opinion.
Yeah, so if I want to leave Australia, I need to live less than 45 days over the next 3 years, and then I can stop paying taxes to Australia. So I'm basically living somewhere else. Yeah, so they're going the route of the US, taxing you as a citizen without really taxing you as a citizen, essentially. Wow.
Effectively, except you get no relief for foreign income exclusion like the US.
Right.
You just straight away you're going to be taxed, or well, for 3 years you're going to be taxed, which is quite a lot in when you think about it.
But this is proposed, right? So it's not even coming into law. It's basically a proposal, and it's being debated if it's going to go through, essentially.
Yes, but I don't imagine it would be debated too much.
Okay.
They're talking about it, but I haven't heard any of the opposition mention anything about these kind of changing these tax rules. I think it's a general consensus that most parties or most government parties want to simplify these rules. And so I can't imagine it would change too much.
Got it. And I know you're helping one of my clients who I helped move to Dubai. You're helping him out leaving Australia. And I want to talk about him in specific because he's worth quite a lot, over 100, I think 50 to 100 million dollars. So in his particular case, I'm looking through the notes that you gave me here. So the main things to consider here is that he bought property, the place where he went to. He bought cars. He got a driving license. He got bank accounts, telephone numbers. His children joined gyms. They joined judo studios. They started learning the local language. So essentially they integrated themselves extremely well into the new place. And that's what you recommend all Australians do. So essentially you're not just going somewhere to pay tax for a little bit, nomading all over the place. You're actually really building roots to that place. What if, let's say I move to Dubai. I'm Australian tax resident. I move to Dubai. I want to get out as soon as possible because of the mandates or whatever. I move to Dubai. I get a residence. I get a long-term lease, or I buy a property for $1 million. Can I travel around, or do I need tax residence after 180 days?
You don't need tax residence per se. You just need to ensure that your domicile, so the place where you call home, is no longer Australia. So you can buy a place in Dubai, set up, and then potentially use it as your base and then travel around as you see fit. But as long as you don't come back to Australia as it's your base, then it can be argued that your domicile is no longer in Australia. Your domicile is now in Dubai, which means you're effectively a non-tax resident for purposes in Australia.
Got it. And whenever this actually goes through, obviously it's going to become a lot harder. Do you have an expected timeline? Like, would you say get out of Australia in the next 8 months of this year, or get out of Australia before July? Which would be like the proposed date for this?
So at the moment, they flagged that it's going to take action as of the 1st of July, after the bill has received royal assent. So after it's been made law. I can't imagine it's going to be made law within the next couple months. Okay. So I'm giving it about 12 months for you to start planning, but it's always a good opportunity to start planning. And there's still a lot we need to uncover from these rules. For example, I'll give you an example where if you're going to a country where there's a double tax agreement with Australia, potentially what would happen there is the double tax agreement will take precedence to the Australian tax law, and you'll be deemed to be a non-resident for tax purposes in Australia if you are a tax resident of a country that has a double tax agreement. So for example, the UK, the US, Canada, Germany, France, there's about 20, 30 double tax agreements Australia has. But again, it's limiting your option, because you can't go to the UAE where there's zero tax, for example, and where I know you love it there.
Yeah, obviously, if there's a double tax treaty, it's because they also have taxes. So you're screwed both ways. Yeah, for sure. Awesome, Mark. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for explaining the rules and the process and everything. If you want to contact Mark, his links are in the description. I absolutely love him. We've talked a lot of times, and you're helping a lot of my clients. So definitely a lot of value for Australians and all over the world as well. These rules apply to many developed countries. Thank you for your time. We'll see you on the channel very soon again.
Thanks, Raf. Talk soon.
Thank you for watching this interview with Mark. If you want to check him out, obviously the links are in the description. If you want to work with us to move to a tax-free place, or at least move your business, your gains to a tax-free country so you can pay less taxes and also work with professionals like Mark, go and click that first link in the description. Book a call with the Wealthy Expat team so we can help you in your particular situation. Analyze what you need to do, what steps you need to take right now to lower your taxes legally, to set up everything in the right way so you have the lifestyle that you want, so you have the taxes that you want, the business wealth that you want, click that link in the description right now and click the video that is going to pop up here, how Australians can pay less taxes right now, what the process is, and how I recommend Australians go about paying less taxes. Click it right now. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, that like button down below. This is the Wealthy Expat. Thank you for watching.